Yes, I think just to follow on what Daniel said, I mean, put in the context that Lebanon hosted 1 million Syrian refugees, a quarter of its population were refugees. That's a real refugee crisis, and it's remarkable how many people do not understand that of the 5.5 million Syrian refugees, most of them landed up in the region. It was the richer middle-class Syrians who managed to make it into Europe, who had the resources, etc. But most of them, went to Lebanon, to Jordan, to Turkey. And actually,
layered on top of Palestinian refugees.
Top of Palestine refugees in Lebanon and Jordan. But also that actually the internally displaced in Syria had even worse conditions. So we had 6.5 million IDPs in Syria, in some of the most appalling, because they were beyond any international assistance in many cases. And that internal displacement is still continuing. We've seen it in some of the fighting in the north and the northeast in recent weeks. And then you have also the people who weren't actually able to move because they were frail, elderly, who actually had to stay in areas that were under siege. So the issue of displacement in what's going on, and I remember being in Syria in 2006, hosting huge numbers of Lebanese refugees who were fleeing the conflict of that year. So that's just to put in that the experience of mass displacement in these countries dwarfs anything that we have in our experience in recent times. The situation with refugees has unfortunately, for historical reasons in Lebanon, become toxic. I remember being out there at the start of the Syria refugee crisis. They didn't want UNHCR to refer to refugees. There were people who fled the events in Syria. They didn't set up formal refugee camps. That was also toxic, so you never had a Syria refugee camp. You had Syrian communities, often on farmland, etc. And initially, Lebanese communities were very welcoming. But of course, it was a drain on their resources. When I met one mayor of a municipality, he said, look, half my population are now Syrian refugees. I have limited resources. We have to collect rubbish. We have to provide electricity and water. In a country that was subsequently, of course, hit by the banking crisis, had its own problems even before that. So it's been a huge, huge challenge for Lebanon. And of course, they brought in their own issues from Syria. The war was still going on and all the struggles and the tensions are there. So it's been a monumental challenge. There were, unfortunately, and they still exist, an element of the Lebanese political system who want to forcibly return them. That exists. I remember the previous foreign minister lecturing us here in London on this, saying, Syria refugees need to go back when it wasn't safe to go back. And even today, and I'd add a word of caution here, that Syria is not even in a recovery phase yet. 9 out of 10 Syrians are in dire poverty. There are not the levels of infrastructure to provide for the return of many of these refugees, yet within some of these countries, of course, there is a big and understandable, I get it, desire to see those refugees go back to Syria. But they're not yet ready. We have also, and this has not been commented on so often, because of what's been happening in Syria to certain communities, and you mentioned the Druze, there has been an outflow of Syrians into Lebanon as well as some returning. I think UNHCR says that there's 1.2 million have gone back to Syria generally overall, not just from Lebanon, but there has been also a large number, I think it was maybe up to about 200,000 maybe. I'll have to come back to you on the exact figure, who have left. And they've left, some of them Alawis, some of them Druze, and others because they don't feel safe.